and welcome to Indus Special. I'm Meshal Malik. Amongst others, there are three specific world leaders who have had a huge amount on regional and international dynamics. But that's not the only reason why they make the headlines. It's also because of their peculiar personalities and eccentric habits. President of the United States, Donald Trump, Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, and the Supreme Leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-Un, are embodiments of unconventional leadership styles. They have had more than their fair share of eyebrow raises and tabloid headlines. On tonight's show, we take a closer look at how the world perceives them and how, despite being confronted a host of controversies, have they cultivated foreign relations with the rest of the world. Let's begin with President Donald Trump. Joining us for this discussion is Mr. Brecht Jonkers, who's an analyst joining us from Belgium. We're also joined by Mr. Fadel Abdul Ghani, who's an activist joining us from Doha. Thank you both for joining us. Mr. Jonkers, let me begin with you. Now, we're hearing a lot of talk about the President of the United States possibly being impeached. There's scandal after scandal. The latest news of how migrants are being treated at the southern border has had the world shocked. How have Trump's domestic policies impacted his perception, first and foremost, as the leader of America, but amongst the general global population?
Well, I can, of course, speak about the way the population in Belgium and in Europe at large. You hear a lot of talk about President Donald Trump, and most of it is in a quite negative way, of course, because Donald Trump is seen. I've seen it said in a way that I think is very clear, is actually very true. You can call Donald Trump basically America without the humanitarian face that they would normally wear. So Donald Trump basically expresses let's say the underbelly of the United States itself. He represents a sort of unmasked imperialist and very aggressive hawkish attitude. However, the problem that you have seen, of course, with Donald Trump is that he has a tendency to change moods quite a lot, to change his decisions quite a lot. We've seen this especially when talking about North Korea. At the same time, Donald Trump has been threatening North Korea with total nuclear annihilation, but then last week he was the first ever sitting American president to visit them. So when you see people's thoughts about him people are very confused in general, and people have this idea that Donald Trump is not the kind of person who should have been in the White House in the first place, and is kind of being pushed around by the advisors that he puts there in the background around himself.
Right, and he talks a lot about how he was a businessman before this, but do you think he's also treating America like it's a business?
I think that's basically how he goes with it. And we have to bear in mind that even when Donald Trump was a businessman, he actually went bankrupt several times with several of his businesses. And of course, we have to hope that he does not believe that he can bankrupt the country and be bailed out like he was when he was a businessman, because that's not that easy when you bankrupt the country. So I think he didn't say that he's going to run America like a business. The problem is that is actually a terrible way to rule a country. So yeah, I believe that this what he believes is his experience that made him a good candidate for the presidency. That this experience is actually a little bit pointless when it comes to worldwide politics, or geopolitics, which goes far beyond the simple financial concept of running a business.
Right. And going to Mr. Fadel Abdul Ghani, something that Mr. Jonkers mentioned here was quite interesting, was that Donald Trump represents America without its humanitarian mask. Now, mask almost gives a connotation or almost implies that it's something to be disposed of, and America is wearing a mask. It's a facade. Do you think Trump is representing and showing a side of America that does exist, an ugly side, but it is there?
Actually, when President Trump is starting his administration, we get a hope in Syria that after Obama withdraw from the region, President Trump will be back as a Republican and engage and try to solve the Syria dilemma and the crisis, which is the worst humanitarian crisis in all around the world. We are talking about 13 million displaced out of Syria, inside or outside Syria. died in schools and hospitals, which is unprecedented since World War II. Here, where is the leader showing themselves and letting Iran engage more in Syria? Now, unlike this, we are seeing President Trump visiting
Mr. Ghani, just on that point of Syria, we heard about Trump saying that he's going to pull out forces. He didn't do that. Do you think his policies are confused, or do you think that he does have a very clear policy, but he just tries to create a spectacle, a distraction, and then does what he wants anyways?
Not at all, actually. I visited U.S. several times. 3 months ago, I visited the White House and the State Department. Actually, there is something unclear for us from the one side. The Pentagon want further interfere in Syria and want this maybe shellings and attack against civilians, especially from the Russian troops, to be stopped, actually, which is the American responsibility. But by other hand, there is like other statement like what you mentioned, the pull out of the troops, the State Department. So there is actually types of discrepancy in between the administration itself. There is no clear view or clear vision about what they're going to do with Syria. Withdraw from Syria, that means more engagement, and Iran will seize more territory at the expense of and that's also contradict what they are gonna do. They want to find Iran in Syria. That's actually here a huge contradiction, because withdraw the American, that means expansion of Iranian troops, which is actually on the border of the American territory, which is they are supporting SDF forces in Syria.
Mr. Ghani, stay with us on that point of Iran. I want to ask Mr. Jonkers here, all that it has done when it comes to Iran, it seems to have undone all the hard work of the U.S. in the past. And do you think in this case, too, that this was whimsical of him, or was there a plan?
Well, regarding the Iranian nuclear deal, the JCPOA, I think once again Donald Trump is basically carrying out the will of the war hawks in the United States. We've seen that definitely with the appointment of John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and other such people to important positions. We've seen it with former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani, who is openly courting the MEK, which is a terrorist organization that has massacred thousands of Iranians over the past decades, and who is now openly harboring these terrorist forces in the United States with the goal of overthrowing Iran. So when you see that Donald Trump is really trying to push for a total destruction, basically, of Iran, this is basically just carrying out the will of those people who were opposed to Barack Obama engaging in negotiations with Iran, even though these negotiations were perfectly sensible. So we know from the International Atomic Energy Agency that Iran has kept to all of its parts of the deal. They have indeed limited them their uranium enrichment, their peaceful nuclear energy program, and yet nevertheless, Donald Trump has decided to very hawkishly and very
Mr. Jonkers, we've seen him take a hard stance against, for example, North Korea previously. And like we talked about, he became the first sitting president to visit North Korea. He took a hard stance against China. But after the G20 summit, they've decided to put a halt on these sanctions and the tariffs. Now, let's talk about Iran. Do you think he might possibly use that same strategy here?
It is actually my hope that Donald Trump will do what he has done before, and that is basically try to funnel the blame to some of his advisors and to kick out the advisors that are the most dangerous, let's say, for international peace. So it is actually, I hope, and I think it might be possible that John Bolton might be the next, let's say, victim of the purges within the White House, and that way Donald Trump will try to gracefully back out of his war rhetoric against Iran. That would probably be the best case solution, because that way we can avoid total war in the Middle East.
But would it be graceful? Isn't all of this showing that his ultimate fall from grace, that he cannot go on one straight line? He backtracks, he changes his word, no one can trust him.
Yeah, that's what when I mean that he tries to gracefully back out of. That means that might be probably in his own vision. However, indeed, for most people, most analysts I've spoken with and things I've heard yesterday, I've heard an analyst say that Donald Trump is basically mentally challenged. Then I think things like that might be, of course, that is a harsh way of saying it, but I think he's definitely not capable of leading a nation, and the only reason why he leads a nation is because of this popularity contest that U.S. democracy has in fact become. So he has played the public masterfully. His electoral campaign was a gem, let's say, of electoral politics. But now that he is there, it is basically it's turned out to be somewhat of a disaster.
Right. And on that point, thank you so much, Ms. Brecht Jonkers, for joining us and talking to us. Mr. Ghani, going back to you and talking about how Trump is the world leader, his leader of the free world. A Washington Post article recently stated that Trump almost spews out 12 lies a day. Now, let's talk about this in a global scenario. A leader that is being claimed as, lying left, right, and center. How is that creating a trust deficit? And how is that impacting in real-time politics?
Of course, you are totally right. There is a lot of things to be engaged in between those leaders rather than showing and taking photos. And now all of us saw this hashtag unwanted Ivanka. It's the first around the world publishing his daughter photos and how she engaged. Actually, this is now a part of a family administration, which is also unprecedented in the U.S. foreign policy. This is not Syria. We are not talking also about Libya or Lebanon. This is should be on the top democratic countries, which is accepted by the American. And we saw now a high level of criticism in between this hashtag. And going back to the crisis around the world, this should be actually where is the leader proof themselves. Iranian engagement, and I disagree with your guest actually. He is against squeezing Iran, but by other hand, he is actually welcoming by his talks Iran engagement in Lebanon,
Do you
Syria,
think he's doing
Iraq.
this to provoke Iran, to get a reaction and to see what happens?
Actually, that's what we hope, but till now there is no real action. And we saw how Iran is targeting the U.S. Aircraft without any response till now. This talking, actually, we are thinking that this will lead to other types of negotiation only. There is no response to Iran. Otherwise, a response Iran should be at the first stage in Syria, whereas the Iran expand and reach to the Mediterranean Sea actually through Syria and through with Hezbollah. Here is the real action actually should be taken.
Right. And Mr. Ghani, something I do want to talk about is the fact that when the narrative about any policy is coming out of the United States, can the people trust it? I mean, it seems like there is a rift undergoing in the administration itself. In 2018, there was a New York Times article which talked about how there is this process of undermining Trump within the White House, and it was created a lot of controversy, a lot of stir. It seems like the administration is not on the same page. Now, with that, how is that determining foreign policy? How is that impacting foreign policy? And how are other countries circumventing that?
Of course, that hit your credibility as the largest power all around the world, and that's affect your allies as well. We are ourselves as seeking for democracy and allies for the Western. They should support us. But let me give you a very clear example about what's going on in using the chemical weapons, which is mass destruction weapons all around the world. And here should be a total engagement. There is promises not only from the U.S. administration, but as well from the UK and France. If the Assad regime use the chemical weapons again, there is decisive action should be implemented. But where is this action? Assad is used the chemical weapons 1 month ago in Latakia, and there is only statement that okay, we have indicated the chemical weapons. Assad, the OPCW team entered Syria without any action or reaction from the United States foreign policy see.
Right. On that note, thank you so much, Mr. Fadel Abdul Ghani, for joining us and talking to us about this. Now we're joined by Dr. Winnie King, who is an IR expert joining us from Bristol. Thank you so much, Ms. King, for joining us. Now, while we're talking about Trump's regime and we're talking about Trump's tenure, we're seeing a shift in the global perceptions of the United States. There is a fall in ratings, approval ratings, and not just amongst those countries that were traditionally hostile towards the United States, but with the allies as well. How are the allies being impacted by Trump's erratic behavior?
Oh, that's a very large question. I think so. With regards to the Europeans, they're making more effort to develop their own independent military force. With regards to the actions of other players within the international system, you actually see the Europeans and the Chinese actually negotiating when it comes to multilateral institutions. When Trump was initially elected in 2016, you actually saw Europeans calling upon China and Xi Jinping to take the reins of some form of global leadership. To try and fill a vacuum that they believe the Americans were not willing to take on.
Right. And Dr. King, hold on to that point. I also want to introduce Mr. George Szamuely, who is our expert joining us from Hungary. Thank you so much, Mr. George, for joining us. Now, before we continue and talk more about how the situation is folding out with the allies of the United States, let's watch a little clip of an interview Trump gave earlier on Fox News when he talked about the European Union. Let's take a look at it.
Is Europe going to be the next target after you're done with China? Where is the next deal being done?
Europe treats us worse than China. Europe is, believe it, look, I come from Europe. You come from Europe, okay? You're one of, you're of the European nations. Yeah. European nations was set up in order to take advantage of the United States. It was set up for trade in order to take advantage, and they have. They very smartly have, and they have Draghi, who is, we should have Draghi instead of our Fed person.
Yeah.
Draghi, as you know, last week, he said lower interest rates and we're going to stimulate the economy.
So, right, you've heard that thought where Trump says that the European states were set up specifically to take advantage of the United States. Mr. George, what are your comments and insights into that?
Well, I don't think the European states were set up originally to take advantage of the United States. And I think that's shown by the fact that originally the United States was very much supportive of the creation of the European Economic Community and then subsequently the European Union. The Americans saw this as essentially a bulwark, part of the Cold War set of institutions to thwart the Soviet Union. What Trump is saying here is that as the European Union has evolved in the post-Cold War world, economically, it's benefiting in its trading relations with the United States. And what he means there is that the currency union gives the Germans in particular a strong advantage because it is that the euro is undervalued. Where before, given the strength of the German economy, you had the old Deutschmark was very strong. But now, with the essential mix of all of the European economies, the euro, which is very useful for the Germans, is undervalued. I think that's what he is getting at.
So do you think he has a point here when he says what he's saying?
Well, he would if he were consistent in his position. Because he says, they're taking advantage of us because we're defending them and they don't contribute to their own defense budget. And that's really bad for us. But the point is that every time the Europeans have brought up the issue of a European dimension to their security and that the Europeans should develop their own military capabilities, the Americans, and in particular Donald Trump, have immediately squashed that and have expressed their strong opposition to any European dimensions of to NATO. No. Only NATO and only NATO under American leadership. So it's a little much for him to be complaining about, they're taking advantages of us. But every time they want to go independent, they would no, absolutely no independence from the U.S.
So, Mr. George, let's talk about the European states at large in the European Union and how their perception, individual perception and a collective perception about the United States has changed over the years. What is happening? What's the major shift here?
Well, the Europeans have always followed the American lead. I think they've always been afraid of going their own way, of striking out independently of the US. In the past, they had these smooth American presidents who were very effective in presenting themselves as genuine leaders of a transatlantic alliance, global policeman, global traffic cop, whatever the euphemism American leaders like to present. So with these smooth operators like Barack Obama in particular, the Europeans could happily just go along with whatever the Americans wanted and think that they were somehow generally advancing stability and Western interests. Trump has kind of discarded all of that. I mean, Trump is so nakedly advancing American interests to the detriment of anyone else, that the Europeans can no longer pretend that somehow the American
and that's a very, very interesting point. Dr. I do want your take on that as well. It seems like all our guests do keep saying this, that Trump is presenting a very, very naked face of America. Do you agree with that, that these interests always existed? Now Trump is just going forward with them in full force.
To a certain extent, yes. I think the key thing that we have to realize is that what Trump is demonstrating to the Europeans is that the Americans do not want to take the full burden and responsibility of the leadership of the international system, because it is very costly, and not just with regards to finances, but with regards to American lives. The fact that the Europeans have, and they have admitted it by the very fact that they have quite easily responded to upping their contribution to NATO, in line with the responsibility that the Americans have provided. They recognize that the Americans are no longer just going to be the Papa Bear to lead the international system. That they actually need to they have some role and responsibility to this. At the same time, however, the Europeans have never shown the desire to lead. They want a multilateral system. And so the idea that the Europeans aren't willing to step out into their own light is fundamentally to do with the fact that they don't have the desire to do that in the first place. They are normatively based. A lot of what they try to do with regards to promoting climate change is their key normative objective. And they have shown their willingness to do that.
Right.
But that's fundamentally different than what Trump is trying to do.
Right. And thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Winnie King, and to us. Mr. George, while we're talking about that, and she mentioned the point of climate change and the fact that the U.S. wants everyone to shoulder their own burden. Now, the U.S. itself pulled out of the Paris Climate Change Accord, and it seemed to be one of the greatest emitters of emissions in the world. Now, we're talking about how it wants everyone to shoulder its own burden, but with its America's First policy, it seems to be a little hypocritical when it expects the world to do just that.
Right. And the point is that when the Europeans do attempt to strike out on their own, the Americans attempt to crush it. Now, a good case in point is the policy towards Iran. The United States pulled out of the JCPOA, but it wasn't content with just pulling out and reimposing sanctions. It immediately imposed sanctions on all of the members of the JCPOA who wanted to continue to adhere to the agreement. So now what we've got is the Americans are threatening sanctions against its European partners who have done absolutely nothing wrong. So here you have an example where, okay, America has its interests. It wants to pursue its anti-Iran vendetta, which has no bearing, first of all, to American interests, but certainly has no bearing on American interests. But it's not content with allowing others to pursue their own policy. It's seeking essentially to hurt them and to punish them for pursuing a policy that is contrary to that of the United States. So it's hard to combine that with the idea that the United States wants the Europeans to share more of the burden. Well, as I mentioned earlier, when the Europeans
Mr. George, let's take this conversation in a more future-forward manner. Let's talk about what do you think will happen in the future. Trump's bullying seems to be consistent. I mean, that's one of the things that he's consistent about. But do you think, as far as he's gotten with all of this, and these are some of the election promises that he said that he would fulfill, many of them that he's almost checked off the list, do you think he might get reelected?
Well, he certainly might get reelected. I mean, at this stage, it's very early to say. But you raise a very interesting issue there, because Trump seems to be pursuing a one-term agenda. Unlike most presidents who usually seek out a two-term agenda, he's pursuing a one-term agenda. In other words, he wants to get everything done as quickly as possible, just in case he might not win the re-election. So at this stage, we don't know.
Right, it's too early to tell.
Whether he was re-elected.
Right.
But it's quite likely that the very things that he has done will be kept on by the next man.
Right, but on that point, of course, he used this as political mileage in the future and to say, look, I did what no one could do before me, something that he keeps on repeating. Thank you so much, Mr. George Szamuely, for joining us and talking to us. We're going to take a short break. When we return, we're going to discuss Narendra Modi and Kim Jong-Un. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special. Now, Prime Minister of India Narendra Modi has been re-elected for a second term. With him previously banking on the story of being the tea seller and for the people, the world is hearing more and more about the human rights violations going on in India. On tonight's show, let's discuss how the world is viewing him as a leader now. Joining us for this discussion is Mr. Muzammil Thakur, who is an analyst joining us from London. We're also joined by Mr. Abubakr Molla, who's an analyst also joining us from London. Thank you both for joining us. Mr. Thakur, let me begin with you. Now, do you think Modi's image at all in the global sphere has changed when he has been re-elected for the second term?
Behind closed doors, it's possible that the facts on the ground, that whatever is happening in India, regardless of whether it's beef lynchings or Kashmir, or the fact that they're trying to Garwapsi issues, what they're trying to do, I think the world community does appreciate the right-wing India that has come to power. But at the same time, they also recognize the economic powers that India has when it comes to the rest of the world. We've seen how Narendra Modi specifically was banned once upon a time from coming to the United Kingdom and going to America, and now he's most welcome. He's apparently Donald Trump's best friend. When it comes to the image itself, I think maybe behind closed doors, maybe in some aspects, some parts of the media, especially in the Western international media, they may recognize the fascist and the right-wing nature of India, of the BJP, of the RSS. However, the fact that India is a growing global power, economic power, and regional power, it's important for the West to maintain that kind of relationship with him, irregardless of how much of a fascist or how much of a killer, how much genocide and ethnic cleansing he has committed inside India, be it as a prime minister or as the chief minister of Gujarat.
Right. And Mr. Molla, do you agree with that at the end it all boils down to real politics? It doesn't matter what the human rights conditions are. It doesn't matter how many people are being lynched or killed in India. All that matters is that India is a growing economy.
No, I do not agree because I work with many international human rights organizations. If you see the last year human rights report of India regarding the Kashmir human rights violation, India has been clearly deplored by the International Human Rights Committee. Many international organizations have deplored and condemned Modi's-led India. And the last report of the United Nations Human Rights Council is the clear proof that India does not have a very positive and good image, in particular in United Nations Human Rights Council. However, as the other person has said, that the international community is maintaining a good tie with India for economic reasons. It might be true, but the image is a very big factor. The image of India under Modi is clearly damaging, and it is a very appalling and shocking image India is achieving under Mr. Modi.
Right.
And if you see the recent report by the international communities, international human rights groups, they have clearly raised their concerns for the safety and security of the Muslims, especially the Kashmiris' human rights are being violated. So the image of Mr. Modi and the record of human rights
and Mr. Molla, in this case, let's talk about not just the fact that Mr. Modi, all of this was done under his power. He has been re-elected again and with an overwhelming majority. What does that give off about India at large, the image of India? Is it becoming more and more intolerant?
Yes, that is very shocking. That is very shocking and appalling that he has been re-elected in a largest democracy. But international community is really concerned that in the name of democracy, democratic values are not being observed. In the name of democracy, anarchy is being developing. And the right-wing anarchy is very developing. Rule of law and justice are not being respected. So this is shocking. This is very alarming that a right-wing political party under the Modi is in the power, and the Muslims, the second largest religious community, are being persecuted. And the international community is really concerned.
Right. And Mr. Thakur, on that point there, when India claims and hails it as the largest democracy in the world, the largest secular democracy in the world, is the world seeing holes in that statement? Do they see what's going on here? I mean, we saw Modi, the same person who was overseeing what happened in Gujarat, which killed so many Muslims, being re-elected, coming into power. Do you think that narrative is falling apart?
No, I think what the reality is and what the image is in terms of the United Nations or the world community, America, United Kingdom, China, Pakistan, that's slightly different to what it is in terms of ground realities and how the reactions are. So let's break it down just a little bit. Narendra Modi came into power. Everybody knew that he was a genocidal maniac. They knew he has committed gross human rights violations in Gujarat. They knew what he has done in Kashmir. Well, at that time he wasn't in Kashmir, but he was a genocidal maniac. He came into power irregardless. Before he came into power, he was condemned. He was banned from coming into different countries, and he didn't have a very good image. But once he came into power, everything changed. He suddenly became the world's largest democracy prime minister, so-called secular largest democracy prime minister, as you mentioned. And that changed. So the image may exist. Now, we have to talk about whether it is the image versus what the reality on the ground is. When we talk about Narendra Modi's coming, the new election, he's won by a clear majority. Let's look who he has in his cabinet. Before he won the election, he still had Yogi Adityanath, who had publicly said about Garvapsi, about converting the Muslims into Hinduism, about raping the women. Then you had Pratigya Thakur, a convicted terrorist inside India who joined the BJP. Just a couple of days ago, you had another MP, a BJP RSS MP, who said exhume the dead bodies of Muslim women and rape them. When we talk about the image, whatever the image may be, it is what the reaction of the community is. The Human Rights Report may have condemned India. 3/4 of that report condemned India. But ask anybody in the international community if there is any follow-up to that Human Rights Report. Did anybody go to India and ask them to focus and work on the human rights record? Nobody did. If anything, the second human rights report that was supposed to come out has been scrapped completely. That is what the image of India is. Although it may be a racist, although it may be right-wing, although it may be fascist and genocidal, ethnic cleansing, human rights violations, however, it is a key strategic partner for many countries, not just America, not just the United Kingdom, but for many, many other countries. You have to remember that India is sponsoring terrorists in Balochistan, what they're doing in Sindh. There is a wide ramification of what the BJP and the RSS being in power means. However, irregardless of the BJP being in power or not, it suits certain narratives. It suits certain people. On the one side, you have the issue of the Rohingya and how the international community have completely annihilated the image of...
But with all this you've mentioned all the issues here, but all of this happening, he's getting reelected, and the image still, you're saying, with the ground reality, there is a great diversion between what's happening on ground and what his image is. Do you think this will just embolden him further to do whatever he has done in the past?
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. That is a critical issue. Whatever he did in his first term of office is going to be nothing compared to what he's going to do in his second term of office. You also have to remember that he has the previous chief intelligence officer as one of his cabinet members, Ajit Doval. Now, this Doval doctrine is going to be used across the board. Across the board. This pan-India, pan-Hindutva ideology that they have, why they've strengthened their ties in Afghanistan, why they're trying to strengthen their ties with Israel, as we have seen. Whatever has happened in the previous term of the BJP and the RSS, I'm more than certain that it is going to exponentially increase. As we have seen, since his term in office, we have seen the more lynchings that have happened in India. We have even seen an imam's daughter that was raped recently, and there were 100,000 people that protested. And in that protest, there were scores of people that were injured to try and subdue it. And you see the reactions of the government, of the BJP government, of Modi himself, who has said that, you should not condemn the state governors, the government, you should not condemn the state chief ministers, you should condemn the actions.
And Mr. Thakur, just a last question to you. We know that Modi is good at evading questions. Now, he perhaps has never given a press conference in India. He doesn't answer questions. The latest press conference he did give, he didn't take questions from it. Now, with all of this, how does the world see his silence on these matters?
I think the world sees it as a defeat, well, not a defeatist policy, but they see it as self-incriminating. However, at the same time, it becomes a matter of economics, of strategic policies. The fact that whether he accepts or actions those issues is irregardless to them. Although it may seem that they have constituents in America, there may be a very large constituent of Muslims, of Muslim Indians, of human rights activists that would lobby their governments to talk about these issues. However, at the same time, whether the image is positive or negative, the image is undoubtedly negative. However, it comes back to the same issue. Strategic policies, strategic interests.
And on that note, thank you so much, Mr. Muzammil Thakur, for talking to us. Mr. Molla, while we're saying that geostrategic interests are taking precedence in this case, and that's why people are remaining silent when it comes to India's atrocities, but we're also saying that Modi will be emboldened in his second term, and these will escalate. Do you think that countries will be willing to take a hard stand now against him?
I don't think that the international community will be really tough against India's human rights violations, because we do not see there any sign of that. And it is very shocking, and it is very deplorable and appalling that international community is not really acting for the restoration of human rights, rule of law and justice, especially for the Indian citizens, or India's role in the Indian subcontinent to shatter the human rights record. However, it is very appalling, as I said. International community really should act now, otherwise they will have to repent later on, and they will have to be upset, because the role India is playing at the moment, the situation will getting worse day by day. And it will go across the country, not inside the country. The whole region will be suffering, not only the citizens of India. Of
course, whatever is happening in India will create waves across the region, as you rightfully pointed out. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Abubakr Molla. Now let's move on to Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un, North Korea's supreme leader, is a personality which is an enigma of sorts. People don't know much about the country, but they also do not know much about his own persona and his own personality. He's a mystery. But let's, on this show, find out how his leadership style is impacting his diplomatic relations. Joining us for this conversation tonight is Mr. Joseph, who's an analyst joining us from Hong Kong. We're also joined by Mr. John Lyman, who's a political analyst joining us from Seoul. Thank you both for joining us. Mr. Lyman, let me begin with you. Now, how is Kim Jong-un perceived in the outside world? Give us a brief overview of it.
Well, aside from his upbringing and living in Switzerland where he went to school, you don't really know a lot about the man because everything is very secretive in the kingdom. Everything is very top-down, bureaucratic, and I think he prefers it that way. He likes the world knowing that he rules with an iron fist and absolute power. You won't see him giving interviews, and he hasn't. I think he took one question at the summit between Trump and himself a few months ago. And I think he prefers that. I think he's perceived somewhat as a shy leader, but who still rules with absolute power. He's unchallenged in his country. And I think for some leaders like Donald Trump would probably enjoy that kind of power.
Yeah, but it seems like Donald Trump's relationship with Kim Jong-un has also gone through its highs and its lows. We saw Twitter spats, but now we saw a handshake over the border. Mr. Cheng, while we're talking about him, and as Mr. Lyman said, that he is a shy leader, but he's also seen as one of the most dangerous dictators in the world. Now, how much danger does North Korea in fact pose, and how much of it is being heightened because of Kim Jong-un's image?
Well, Kim Jong-un certainly is a very dangerous dictator within his own country. His father actually arranged a team of elderly politicians and generals to guide him in his early years, given his young age, and given the fact that he did not enjoy any lengthy cultivation and political training by his father. However, he soon executed his uncle in a very cruel manner and soon emerged as the absolute leader within North Korea. And it seems that he can remove senior officials, senior leaders from the leadership at will. How dangerous he is to the world is another matter. I think the outside world tends to have a mystical image of the leader, but his grandfather, his father, and now Kim Jong-un, they all appear to be very shrewd politicians. And the most important objective of their regimes is to maintain its survival. Given the fact that North Korea is surrounded by strong countries, given the fact that it is very much threatened by to the United States and to a lesser extent by Japan and South Korea. So survival is very important. And through power politics, through international maneuvering, and now, of course, through the attempts to acquire nuclear weapons and long-range missiles, North Korea apparently would like to have a nuclear capability and a delivery system so as to ensure its survival, so as to generate and possess a deterrence against external attacks, especially those from the United States.
Right. Mr. Lyman, while we're talking about the hostile relationships and that North Korea has had past, and the U.S. is, of course, a clear example. This time around, when we saw this extension of a fig leaf to Kim Jong-un by Donald Trump, do you think personalities of both leaders played any role in doing this? And not just talking about Trump himself, but also Kim Jong-un.
Well, I think it's hard to gauge without being in the room between the two of them. The press were excluded from their one-on-one meeting. I think Ivanka Trump was in the room. But on the whole, I think both their personalities play well off of each other. Donald Trump, I want to say, applauds him in person and in public, and I think that feeds into Kim Jong-un's ego to a point. He craves recognition as a leader, and for North Korea, And I think Donald Trump is affording him that. No other leader has really done that up until now, except for Moon Jae-in. So I think it definitely it offers Kim a certain level of validity on the international stage.
Right. And with that validity, a lot of people are also questioning whether this entire tweet and then going and meeting within 24 hours was just a spectacle. I mean, there couldn't be anything meaningful coming out of that meeting, or could it be?
No, it was all spectacle. As you're seeing in the U.S. right now, leading up to the 4th of July celebrations, Donald Trump is involving U.S. military tanks and a lot of elements of the military. That's never happened before in the U.S. history. So I think very much the meeting between him and Kim Jong-un was very much a spectacle. And any substance to come out of it is probably short-lived, only because both sides are coming from the issue on totally different sides. They all have different objectives. And I think you probably won't see a lot of substance.
Right. And Mr. Cheng, while we're talking about how Kim Jong-un might have been given a little more validity after this meeting, do you think that on the world stage there will be some greater acceptance towards him? The fact that North Korea is treated as such an isolationist state, that will change in any manner?
Well, it has been the objective of the three Kim regimes to secure security of the country against a possible American attack. Today, of course, Pyongyang believes that its nuclear capability, its missile delivery system, will more or less give it a kind of deterrence. It is not thinkable, actually, for the United States to attack North Korea for the basic reason that the cost will be very high, and it will be opposed by both South Korea and Japan, especially South Korea. And this will also cause a lot of alarm and opposition from Russia and China.
Right.
So this is the situation. And certainly from Pyongyang's point of view, from Kim Jong-un's point of view, the American demand that it should complete first a irreversible, verifiable, and complete denuclearization before the United States would consider the lifting of sanctions, economic sanctions, is not acceptable.
Right. And on that point, I'll have to thank you for joining us. We're running out of time. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Joseph Cheng, and thank you for joining us, Mr. John Lyman. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We will see you again next week with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.